So in Matthew 5:18, Jesus says, "Not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished." And the question is this: what did Jesus mean when he said all?
All right, let's see it.
Because he doesn't explain the scope of his comment. What does he mean by all being accomplished? Was he referring to every last thing that has ever been prophesied, including his second coming? Well, the New Testament reveals that can't be what he meant. Why? Well, because there are so many examples of Old Covenant commands that have passed from the law. For example, Hebrews 10:18, there is no longer any offering for sin. Now, the Sinai law absolutely required offerings for sin. So there's a change that's much bigger than a dot or iota. And Colossians 2 says that the Old Covenant feasts and food laws and Sabbaths are no longer required. Hebrews 7 and 8 say the priesthood is no longer required. Galatians 5 says circumcision is no longer required. And in John 4, Jesus himself prophesied that worship at the temple would no longer be required. These things didn't just pass away, they were fulfilled in Christ. They reached their God-ordained goal. So I believe when Jesus says, until all has been accomplished in Matthew 5:18, he's specifically talking about everything the Son of Man was sent to accomplish during his earthly ministry. I mean, the resurrected Jesus says this to his disciples in Luke 24. "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. You are witnesses of these things." His disciples witnessed the fulfilling that Jesus foretold in Matthew 5:18. The all that Jesus referred to was accomplished through his death and resurrection, which fulfilled the scriptures and inaugurated the new covenant.
So if you paid close attention to all the scriptures that this content creator brought up in an effort to try to contextualize what the author of Matthew was having Jesus say in Matthew 5, you'll note that they never brought up another passage from Matthew. All of the scriptures they brought up were from the letter to the Hebrews, or from Paul, or from pseudo-Paul, or from Luke, or from some other author. And there's a very good reason for this. And the reason is that the Gospel of Matthew consistently represents Jesus as saying the law of Moses will continue to be in force and authoritative until the second coming, until the eschaton. And this content creator is ignoring the immediate context of the statement that they're highlighting, because that provides additional support for the conclusion that the author of the Gospel of Matthew has Jesus saying the law of Moses will continue to be authoritative until the end of the world, until the second coming. And they even skipped over the beginning of the sentence that they're highlighting. So let's take a look at the passage. Now, they were looking at verse 18, but they were looking at the second half of it. Not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. So we have a temporal clause at the end of that, but the sentence begins with a temporal clause. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. And grammatically, according to the majority of scholars who have commented on this question, the use of two temporal clauses here indicates that these are understood to be contemporaneous. In other words, all being fulfilled is contemporaneous with the heavens and the earth passing away. And we can see this as well in Matthew 24, verses 34 through 36, where we have Jesus talking about all these things being fulfilled once the heavens and the earth pass away. So if you are keeping the scope of your contextualizing campaign on the Gospel of Matthew, which ought to be your priority, even if you go beyond it afterwards, your priority is what the author of the Gospel of Matthew has written, you can see that the law of Moses remains in effect. You have Jesus telling other people elsewhere in the Gospel of Matthew, keep paying your tithing, keep bringing your offerings to the temple, keep obeying the Sabbath, keep doing all these things. The only changes that Jesus introduces to the law are escalations of the severity of the law, as we see in this very passage. Because let's go on, verse 19. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is telling his followers, don't teach people to stop following the law of Moses. In fact, let's look at verse 20. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. The Gospel of Matthew presents the scribes and the Pharisees as fastidious followers of the law, and Jesus is saying, you must be even more careful followers of the law. And that's when we get into, in the Sermon on the Mount, you have heard Moses said, don't do this. Well, I'm ratcheting it up. Don't even do this. Don't even think about it. So Jesus is escalating parts of the law and asserting the continued authority and relevance of the rest of the law throughout the Gospel of Matthew. Why do you have to go appeal to outside texts in order to try to recontextualize this? Because you're presupposing univocality, and the only way to make Matthew say what you allow Matthew to say is by appealing to other passages to overrule what the author was trying to get at. This is what the presupposition of univocality does. It allows us to say, this is all fungible. This is all part of the same single, unified, consistent voice and message. Therefore, we can take the puzzle pieces from all over, or better, the Lego bricks from all over, to construct what we want to construct. And we can put it on top of the passage we don't like to overrule it, to silence it, to make Matthew say something other than what the author of the Gospel of Matthew was trying to say. The author of the Gospel of Matthew was disagreeing with all those other texts that this content creator quoted, because the author of the Gospel of Matthew wants the law of Moses to continue to be authoritative, wants Jesus' followers to continue to follow the law of Moses. That's not what this content creator wants, so this content creator must leverage other passages from elsewhere along with the presupposition of univocality in order to overrule what the Gospel of Matthew has to say. So, if you actually want to understand what the author of the Gospel of Matthew was trying to say in Matthew chapter 5, it was that the law of Moses continues to be in effect, continues to be authoritative, continues to be an expectation for the followers of Jesus until the end of the world. And the fit for this video has been Master of Puppets.